Hey guys, this is Christy from Not Your Average Athlete. I'm an athlete, author, content creator, journalist, someone with ADHD, and obviously a Substacker. And today I'm coming to you to tell you something I never thought I'd hear myself say. I'm blowing up my life. Not because I did something wrong. I'm doing it on purpose because I'm stuck. And I see this as a hard reset. It's like a computer. Something's going wrong. You don't just keep trying to play with the computer necessarily. Usually, the best way to solve the problem is to do a hard reset. And that's what I'm doing here. And before I go any further, I want to encourage anyone listening. I am going to discuss some disordered eating. I'm going to discuss some struggles with food. So, if that's something you're sensitive to, I'd recommend considering whether you want to listen. And if you do listen, please know I am not a doctor. I am not a nutritionist. I'm not a psychologist or a professional. I'm sharing what works for me right now. And if you have any issues around food that is really controlling your life, I suggest you seek help from a professional. So let's keep going. And first, I want to tell you where I got to this point and what got me here. I was talking to Ross from ADHD Big Brother, and he said something that made me think. And I'm just now correcting. His name is Russ, not Ross. Um, he said, "We don't do moderation well." And that stuck with me because we were talking about food and alcohol, and I've never had a drinking issue, but people in my family have. And my dad actually quit alcohol cold turkey, and he quit smoking cold turkey. And a lot of people say, how could he have possibly done that? He did it because I think, like me, he reached this point where he didn't see any other option and he just did a hard reset. And I think for neurodivergent people, we tend to, gravitate towards extremes anyway. And we don't do moderation well, like he said. And that got me thinking because I had been trying to, quote, hack my diet for the last several years. I have always had issues with food. When I was 11, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I didn't remember it mainly because I was also diagnosed with food sensitivities. And the solution back then was to go on an elimination diet, which basically means you take away all the foods that are impacting you and then slowly add them one at a time and see if your symptoms come back. So for me, I loved anything that was sweet or, dairy. I loved ice cream. I would drink milk out of the carton. I once ate like probably a pound of cheese cubes from one of those craft bags from Sam's Club, like the big bags. So I love dairy. I loved sugar. I would binge eat on sugar any chance I got. The first thing I did that sort of fit into that like binge eating thing is when I was 7, I got my first advent calendar and I waited till my parents were outside and opened all the squares, ate the chocolate, closed the squares, and my parents didn't realize until the next day that I had, consumed all the chocolate. And back then it was sort of like, this is Christie's quirk. And, it was a problem, but it was manageable. And since I had parents who I was with most of the time, that didn't happen too often. And, then as I got older, I had access to money and I had jobs. So I would indulge in my binge eating in private. I'd buy stuff, I'd store it, in my room or whatever, and I'd eat it whenever no one was around. And, I was still able to stay pretty fit and I felt pretty good about myself. I was still an athlete, I was still doing well. I was still lean because I never stopped moving. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and I couldn't get my favorite treats. And I had been doing other things up until then. I was a CrossFit trainer, I was training in speed skating and figure skating, and I was doing well. Again, I had just won a gold medal at an international figure skating competition that fall. So I was actually preparing to go overseas for a figure skating competition when COVID happened. And of course, I ran home. We were actually in Florida at the time. And I couldn't go to any of my favorite places and eat. So I was already pretty fit, but I immediately saw myself get fitter and I felt better. I wasn't having any of my little like binge eating episodes. And, all of this stuff showed me that the times that I did best in my life were the times that I did this sort of hard reset, whether it was by necessity or because I didn't have a choice, right? And that's what led me to this point. And I realized recently, since I got injured in 2023, I couldn't train as much. I felt sorry for myself. I was eating more. And of course, when you're eating more and you're not exercising, of course, you're going to gain weight, right? And I did. And at first, it was only a little, and then it gradually increased. And here I am. I'm still, fitter than the average person, and I'm still athletic. And I just raced in a race a couple weeks ago, a speed skating race, and I pulled pretty good times. But I couldn't help but think, what would have happened if I had actually been in shape? And this was always running in the background. But as we do, we rationalize. We think, I'll give myself little like moderation hacks, right? I'll give myself loopholes. I'll buy that healthy cheat food. I'll buy the healthy, baked goods, or I'll buy whatever. And I'll have these things available for myself. And this is what I was recommending to other people too. Like, if you feel too deprived, you're going to start overeating. But then I realized all these loopholes weren't really helping me because recently, since speed skiing season ended, I started going back to the gym and I started taking spin classes. Spin classes are not fun. I enjoy the camaraderie and I like having a teacher, but I was, going 4 times a week. And again, I'm biking and I think to myself, I'm basically just working off whatever I'm eating on the side. Because I'd go spin, I'd get off the bike, I'd go walk and get a latte, come home, and I'd wonder why I wasn't losing weight. And, anyone who's had this struggle, who has food issues, will know that you can exercise and yeah, you might see a little improvement, but if you just keep eating junk food or, not being careful about what you're consuming, you're basically just on this hamster wheel. You're doing all this work and you're not really seeing results. And again, I'm not telling anyone who has eating disorders or disordered eating to do necessarily what I'm doing right now, but I want to tell you, I realized like right after I talked to Russ, I'm basically swimming with rocks in my pocket. I'm trying to do these things and I admire these people that are fit and going after their dreams. I'm 35 years old. Like, I've been training since I was probably like 10 years old or 11 years old. I started training more seriously. And I'm realizing I have to really get my life together. And I'm also realizing I'm the one causing my problems, right? And I think we all know that in our head, but it's one thing to recognize and another thing to do something about it. So, all these years I've been educating people about ADHD. I'm coaching people. I can see their patterns. I could see their behaviors. I could give them solutions. But in the meantime, I'm not necessarily walking the walk myself in terms of my own eating. And I'm really good at helping other people, and I'm really good at the hacks, and I'm really good at the psychology. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, great. I'm good at what I do. But if I can't walk the walk, then how am I going to help others to the best of my ability? So now I'm thinking, okay, here's what I have to do. Have to burn the boats. I have to go cold turkey. And big changes work because, moderation is boring. And for people like us with ADHD, we tend to respond to extremes, right? We crave extremes. We want things to be more exciting, and extreme is exciting. And as I've told you, all the times that I achieved the most were when I did extreme things. When I did the elimination diet at 11, lost 30 pounds, and got way better at figure skating. when I was 13 and I moved to Lake Placid, which is an Olympic town in upstate New York, and started training in figure skating and also discovered speed skating. That's where I stepped into my own as an athlete and as a writer. And then at 27, I discovered CrossFit and I started really going into that and became a coach, and figured out this is something that keeps my brain occupied and this is why I like it. And then when I was 29, I won gold at this international adult figure skating competition, even though I gave myself only a couple months to train, had to get my programs all together. It was a nightmare and I was stressed in a way, but it was also great because it pushed me to go after a goal and not make excuses. And then the pandemic, which for a lot of us was so traumatizing, and especially for the folks working on the front lines who were, out working with people dealing with COVID. I give them huge kudos. My aunt was one of them. But, that was also where I realized one, removing like the foods that I like to binge on really did matter. And two, it showed me that I had ADHD because I kind of had a mental health tough time and got diagnosed, found out I had ADHD, and I started educating other people about it. So to me, extremes are something I've been trying to tell people to avoid. And I have my pendulum versus scale analogy, right? So, pendulum is swinging from extreme to extreme, never really staying anywhere too long. But a scale is like one or the other. And a lot of us get into harmful behaviors if we're too extreme and we have all or nothing thinking. But at the same time, I think we really need that sometimes extreme line in the sand because extremes aren't the problem. It's the half measures, it's the not committing that's the problem because then we can get out of it. So, extremes and committing to something and doing something that feels really tough is actually really stimulating for ADHD brains. And it's easier to process because what's easier? I'm not going to do sugar for a week and I'll see how I feel. Or I'm only going to have sugar on Tuesdays and Thursdays and when I feel like it and when I go out to the coffee shop. Like there's too many decisions and too many outs. And your brain doesn't like that. Our brains don't like ambiguity, they like clarity. So having a clear line in the sand is, for me, I think, going to be the answer. So here's what I'm changing. And I think I kind of gave it away. I started yesterday, and Russ and I committed to this ourselves on our live, which I'm also going to include in the post below. But we committed to giving up certain foods. And why do I say give up? I think giving up things and removing things, again, is a lot easier for ADHD brains to process, or anyone actually, because if we have too much that we're adding is difficult. Adding is like another thing to remember. But if you remove something, you're actually taking something off your plate, metaphorically, too. You're getting rid of something that you might be using in your brain that might take a lot of energy. For me, my eating was taking up a lot of energy because I'd spend a lot of time thinking about when I was going to eat, how I was going to eat. Am I going to go to the coffee shop? Am I going to go here and try to buy some stuff that I can have my little stockpile of food? I didn't want to do that anymore. And it was exhausting, frankly. So removing something instead of adding it, I think, is the key. So here's what I'm removing. I'm removing sugar from my diet, not just, hardcore white sugar, but any added sugars. That includes fruits, that includes maple syrup, coconut sugar. And the way I do this is I basically took all the stuff I had in my house, put it in a bag, and I'm going to give it to a friend of mine who also enjoys healthy food. And granted, it's not like I'm eating like Skittles or anything. I have all these organic treats that I kept in case I wanted a treat. I have like cashew nuts with maple syrup on them. I have chocolate covered nuts. I have organic chocolate bars. But having them in my house is just going to make it easier for me to get to them. If I don't have them in my house and they don't exist for me, less chance I'm going to think about them, right? So I'm changing my diet, removing added sugars. I'm also removing my coffee drinks. And I must have spent like, I want to say a couple $100, maybe more like a couple $1,000 over the last few months on coffee. And, going to a specialty coffee shop, you're paying $6, $8, whatever, and that adds up. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it adds up. And for me, I can make the same stuff at home that's actually better. And I'm choosing not to though, because I really don't need the coffee. I have tea. I drink a lot of tea. I've always been a tea person. What I really liked about the coffee is the community and the hot, creamy, sort of comforting vibe. I liked the vibe of going to a coffee shop. I liked getting the coffee. I liked that strong espresso taste. I liked talking to the barista. But now I'm realizing I'm spending all my money. I'm struggling financially, and yet I'm still spending 6 to 8 bucks a time at the coffee shop. And that's not including whatever like baked good there is that I want to buy, right? Or whatever other thing, because it's always more than one thing. So now I'm saying no to any extra coffee drinks outside. I'm going off for like a week. I'm setting a week as my intention. But I have a feeling once that week is up, I'm not going to want to go back. Because once I break that habit loop, it becomes more of a habit. We don't necessarily always like the thing we're doing because we like it. It's because it's a habit, it's comfortable. So, me giving up my coffee drinks, me giving up my sugar, I think is really gonna help, and the best thing about this is it's also going to help me work on my financial status and become a little better with my money, what little I have. I don't really have a lot, obviously. I'm a content creator. I'm looking for another job, but in the meantime, I shouldn't be spending all this money on stuff that is just making me worse. It's making me unhealthy. And again, it's nothing against the folks at the cafe. If I wasn't who I am, if I didn't have all these food sensitivities, maybe I could have a latte. Maybe it would be fine. But I know that it has added sugar, it has added calories, and I'm trying my hardest to spin and do all these exercises and weight classes and everything. And I'm not getting anywhere. So I'm removing those two things that are just adding, more stress and more weight to me. And I'm gonna document this process, right? So, what I'm encouraging you to do this week is think of one thing you can remove from your life. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. I'm not telling you to quit your job or divorce your husband or whatever. I'm not going there, right? This is not life advice in the sense of a professional. I'm giving you my life advice based on where I'm at. And I'm saying, I want you to think of what habit is holding you back. It could be something as simple as, stopping at Dunkin' Donuts on the way home from work and getting a donut. Or it could be, whatever other unhealthy habits you have. It could be impulse shopping at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep, going on Amazon and just impulsively buying stuff. I don't know your life, and I know myself with ADHD, impulsive stuff is kind of part of who we are. But what I'm telling you is this week, just 1 week, I want you to commit to removing something that maybe you've been considering giving up for a while. Maybe, think of it like Lent. I know we're past that point, but what thing can you give up? What thing is holding you back? What thing is actually making your life more difficult? What are your rocks in your pockets? Like, what are the things that you're swimming as hard as you can, and yet these things are dragging you back? I want you to drop it in the comments. And I'm also trying to tell everyone that you can make big changes in your life without changing your location, without putting all your money in crypto. Like, I follow a lot of the productivity guys on Substack and elsewhere. And one thing I really resonate with, but also in my mind, I know is a little bit perhaps less reasonable to recommend to people is to make a big change. And they often say something like, okay, move to another country or move cross country or quit your job and go get another one or whatever. It always has something to do with, in my view, it often has something to do with career. And a lot of us can't afford to do that, right? If you don't have more than a couple $100 in your bank account, maybe it's not a great idea to quit your job or move cross country. I'm definitely not advising any of that. But what I do agree with, and I think this is worth mentioning here as well, is if we make a big change, if we do something dramatic, we're going to have a perspective shift because we're going to see things in a new way. So, for example, when I give up sugar and I start training and I'm training without that added input and I start seeing results, I'm going to want to train more. It's not going to feel like a chore because I'm going to see the results. And it's a lot easier to keep things up if you see results happening. And that's one thing too. Like, we're very impulsive, we have no patience. We want things to happen immediately. And I'm not saying things are going to happen immediately for you. But I do believe if you get rid of something that's been holding you back, you're going to have a perspective shift. You're going to see a new way of doing things, and it might change other things in your life. You might start doing other things. You might start acting in different ways. So, I want you to think carefully about one thing you can remove from your life and, drop it in the comments if you'd like. I think, as Russ and I discussed, accountability is important. Having other people around and having a community is important. Having people pulling for you is important. So drop it in the comments if you feel comfortable. And let's commit together to removing one thing just this week, see how it works, and then see where we're at the end of the week and see if there's something else you can adjust or if you want to keep going. See what changes happen automatically when you remove that one thing. So, if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to be putting this on Not Your Average Athlete, which is notyouraverage.athlete.substack.com. I also encourage you to check out my Work With Me page. I do ADHD coaching and executive functioning coaching. I have years of educating people behind me on Medium and elsewhere. So I really encourage you to check that out if you want to work with me one on one, if you need some help changing some habits, finding more manageable ways of doing things in your life. And I also want to encourage you to subscribe because I'm also going to include the AI prompt I used to help me clarify what I really want. Because this is bigger than just now. It's determining what you really want in your life and figuring out how you can go after that. Because with ADHD, we're great at brainstorming and coming up with ideas, but we don't often follow through. And then we end up more discouraged and more depressed because deep down, we know that we're not doing what we should be doing with our lives. And I still believe that's really like the crux of our attitude and our perspective. If you know you're supposed to be doing something and you're not doing it, you're telling your brain, I'm not reliable. I can't do this. And that continues in every aspect of your life. And you're not going to see the results you want in your life if you keep breaking promises to yourself. I also want to encourage you to check out the live I did with Russ from ADHD Big Brother, because he's the one who kind of got me thinking about this in a different way. And I had sort of been on this track for a couple weeks now. I've known something needs to change, but until we had this conversation and discussed like moderation being difficult and just cutting things out, going cold turkey with something, I hadn't really thought of it as something I could do without spiraling and binge eating more. So, I'm doing this out loud either way, and I want to encourage you to come along if you'd like. And again, comment if you feel comfortable. If not, just continue to watch. And I hope to have some good results for you. I'm also going to be publishing some things that help me, in my life, whether it's diet advice, exercise advice. It's not about dieting. Mine is more about nutrition and making sure you're fueling your brain in a way that's going to help your ADHD work better for you, as well as exercise. And I found some really good solutions for exercise as well. and it's counterintuitive to everything you've probably been taught. I'm going to be dropping that in the next few days too. So subscribe if you want to hear more about this journey that I'm undertaking. If you want to hear more about the diet stuff, the nutrition, the exercise, productivity, I write about all kinds of things, often things that I've learned myself. So, if you like sports too, I also write about athletes and lessons I've learned from a lifetime in sport and what sports teach us about being human. So, either way, I think there's something here for you if you want to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching this. And I hope to see you around more. And I hope you could find that one thing that's going to help you move forward. Thanks.